Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Shadow and Sun Show. Today I'm going to be reviewing the best RPG game book, not necessarily the best game in its entirety, but the best game book. That game is Villains and Vigilantes by Jeff D. and Jack Herman, printed back in 1982. Now let's take a look at the contents. All you really need is this book, and there's actually several versions that came after that I'm kind of anxious to take a look at. But make sure you get this yellow insert. It's sort of an errata sheet with some repeated information, but this chart here, without it, you're going to have an impossible time playing this game. It will also come with this adventure module, Crisis at Crusader Citadel, which I've never actually run. And it will come with a Dungeon Master or Referee screen, which is pretty handy. It's really cheap, really thin and flimsy, but it'll do the trick. Now, this is the original version that I started playing when I was very, very young, and I just happened to have had it this whole time. And it's vastly different. The rules are, massively different. So try to avoid this unless you're a serious collector. It is nice for nostalgia. As you can see, it came out in 1979. But let's get on with the actual important aspects. The game is roughly using the same character stats as Dungeons and Dragons and a lot of other games where you have strength and endurance, agility, charisma, and that sort of thing. What makes this game so versatile is that you could play any game you can imagine, whether it be a Dungeons and Dragons sword and sorcery type of game or a purely superhero game or a high-tech space opera or hardcore just regular science, fiction game without, powers or weird things like that. It's got plenty of rules for psionics. It has plenty of rules for spells, but you mostly have to make up the spells on your own, which is, it's a little work, and there's not really a huge skill-based system because it's relying on the fact that you have powers. Now, what's cool about the powers is that it has a list of generic powers that pretty much cover 90% of the powers. But then it has a similar chart here of devices which mimic many of the powers, but they're all derived from a device, whether it be a robotic body, Iron Man type armor, or a ray gun, or some sort of special gadget. You make that aspect up. It also covers robots and androids. Then it has magic or psionic items, which are pretty much more or less a lot of the same things in the two previous charts. And then it has skills, such things like heightened agility, heightened senses, willpower, weakness detection. It even has pet in there, but that's not really a skill, but whatever. Then it has actual magic and psionic powers. Things like astral projection, flight, spells, psionics, and all of those other categories like psionics and spells. You'll have to do a lot of the work on your own, but the rules to do so are very easy, very simple. Then every character is supposed to have a weakness, and they're not awful. Some of them are. They have things like prejudice, which is, doesn't mean you are prejudiced against something. It's other people are prejudiced against you. Specific vulnerabilities, lowered self-control, mute, reduced agility, reduced stats, or diminished senses. Something to just make your character a little bit more humble and a little bit more less over the top. But you can also elect to discard one of your powers that you were given to get rid of said weakness. Now, the powers are absolutely incredible. There's one power that I'm going to go over because it's possibly my favorite other than teleportation, which, is the greatest superpower you could ever have. It's called just flight. And if your flight exceeds a certain amount, which I believe is 500 miles an hour, then your character can literally fly faster than the speed of light outside the atmosphere, which allows for amazing possibilities. No need for a starship. You could literally fly through space like Superman, provided you have one other power, and that being, I believe, adaptation, which allows you to literally fly through the heart of a sun without any damage, fly through space, fly underwater, immune to certain poisons and gases and all kinds of things like that. The stat system provides the formula for your hit points. Included in that is your actual body weight, which is very, in my opinion, it's a total logical conclusion, and your hit points do not really go up unless your stats or your weight goes up or down. And depending on your exact stat, number, has a hit point modifier, and there's 4 of them for the 4 stats that are relevant, and you times 1 by the next, by the next, by the next, ultimately times your weight divided by 4, which comes up with your hit points. And I've seen characters with hit points in the dozens to thousands, depending on your stats. Your stats can also go up a point per level if you choose that as your reward for going up a level. Going up a level is basically determined by defeating the bad guys and a possible bonus of 500 points per game, as well as if you were to donate funds that you earned fair and square, not just stuff you find, to charities. And those, as you progress, can become, large amounts of money donated to the charity of your choice, and boom, you just racked up a ton of XP, allowing you to go up levels, at a pretty, reasonable clip. The powers are all described very succinctly, very logically for most of the book, and there's reaction tables and campaign advice, and there's a nice section on the law. This is all provided you are actually running a modern day or futuristic superhero or sci-fi game where such things are important. If you're running a sword and sorcery game out of this book, those things are probably completely irrelevant. There's also some sample information on game mastering, some pre-generated characters, some other little bits of information. But all in all, this book is a whopping 47 pages if you don't include the character sheet on the back. And like I always tell everybody I meet when it comes to role-playing games, if I could only have one book and I was trapped on a desert island, this would be the book I would want. This book and a 20-sided die, and I would be able to play Dungeons and Dragons with all my fellow monkeys and parrots and animals on said island, provided there aren't any other humans. And if there were, this would be the game we would play, and we could change it up. If we want to play a Wild West game, not a problem. Want to play a superhero game? Not a problem. Space opera, sword and sorcery game. It's all here in 47 pages. While they made lots of supplements, almost all of the supplements for this game were adventure modules, and I think books like Rogues Galleries full of villains. I played the heck out of this game throughout my life. Many different players, literally hundreds of players I've dungeon mastered this game for. And sometimes we did play science fiction games. Sometimes we played sword and sorcery games just to prove that it could be done. I think once we played a sort of Weird West game, sort of like Deadlands or Shadows of Brimstone with this book. And if you can grab a copy of it, it's not really highly sought after, just because there's so much out there. You may get stuck with like a $50 price tag for the box set, but I know that Drive-Thru RPG and a few other places I think might have printable versions of this game book, and I know there's a couple of places out there that have the more revised second edition out there, and I'm looking for it, but the game is so perfect as it is. It would just be for curiosity's sake. And, I bought revised editions of other games, and the revision was a complete, utter failure and, remake of the game. And, they lose what they already had. This book is the best game book out there. out of all the game books I've read, and I've read thousands of game books, I've played well over 250 different role-playing games, dozens of war games, tabletop games. This is the best. So with that said and done, I hope you guys give it a chance. If you've already got it in your collection, let me know what you think of it, what you thought of it. If you're still playing it, there are a few superhero games out there that are still being played, pretty frequently from what I hear, but they're just reinventing the wheel, and the wheel was invented with 47 pages of perfection. This is it. I hope you guys enjoy it. Hope you enjoyed the review, and of course I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. We will be back with the painting of Oregon the Denouncer, the washes episode. That'll be Sunday. So until then, folks, have a great weekend and enjoy.